Morning, Saurabh. Morning.
Hi, Shrini.
everyone.
It's good to finally see you. I was also attending a part of the morning session. So wonderful to see you and meet you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time.
Pleasure.
Hi, good
Good
morning. Good morning, Srinivasan.
morning. First
Morning,
time I'm
morning.
seeing you. First time I'm seeing you in a virtual session.
Good.
Nowadays it's the other way around, right? You meet people in Zoom first before you meet them in person. But this is the
The other
scenario
way
in
around.
reverse.
Yes. Good. Yeah, God has been kind. Hi, Saurabh, how are you?
Hi,
Hi.
good morning, Rohan. Hi, good to see you.
Hi, morning. Morning.
Good morning, Saurabh and Rohan.
Hey, Suresh.
Good morning. I think Raj, you're also online. You there?
Not yet, I think.
Just message me saying that he's already online.
Shankar, just check with him if he used the right
Yeah,
link.
I'm just checking.
Yeah.
There's so many links. I mean, I joined, I believe, Abhay's link, and then I was in a webinar, right?
I think Shankar, Raj has joined probably as the general lead.
Yes,
Maybe you need to
Raj
update
has
him.
just joined.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Raj. Good morning. What about Abhay? Any update?
Hi, thank you so much here for making me a panelist. I was in the meeting, as a
As an attendee.
Morning, Raj.
morning.
Morning,
Can you
Raj.
hear me good? Good. Yeah.
Very clear. Yeah.
I love your original background. Communicates the right message, right set of people, right set of nomenclatures and pictures to show, and obviously a very prominent logo of yours. So congratulations.
Thanks, Saurabh. I appreciate it.
Suresh, a quick check. My voice is coming clearly. You are able to
Yes.
hear me.
Quite clear. Yeah. Shankar, you checking with Abhay?
Yeah, I'm checking with Abhay. He'll be joining in sometime. We can start the session.
Oh, okay. Actually, I had his name as the first to introduce, but we'll change the sequence. No, I just put it in alphabetical order. I thought that would be simpler than trying to pick and choose. And he's starting with A, and he came up on top. Right. I think, Shankar, we can start the session because it's already 11:46.
Yes, we can start the session.
I mean, are we live, visible to the audience or not?
Yes, it's gone to the audience at 11. We can go ahead, please.
All right. So, very good morning to all.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. So, all right. So, very good morning to all of you. Welcome to this panel discussion. So, as we already heard in the inaugural session, the role of corporates and startups to work together is very critical for the success of both. It's not one is defining the success of the other. So I feel that it is important for both. But starting from the perspective of a startup, once the startup has built the product that they have in mind as a vision and the problem they want to solve, unfortunately, a lot of times startup expects that somebody should fund me so that I can grow. And a lot of times we find that having the right customers and actually generating revenues from the customer and start the journey towards organic growth and then later on get the funding and grow rapidly tends to be a more sustainable model for startup journey. So in that context, today is actually a very significant milestone for T-Hub that we are doing after almost 2 years, an event where we are trying to bring together corporates and startups to talk to each other. And in that context, this panel discussion would hopefully shed some light in terms of how this interaction between the two key players in the ecosystem, the startups and the corporates, happens. What happens, what doesn't work, what works, and how do they help each other. Those are the points that we want to cover today. From that perspective, so we try to maintain a balance. So we have two panelists who come from the corporate side of it, and we have two panelists who are startups. I mean, currently they are basically under the title of startups, but I think they're not far from being called corporates in the very near future. So that's how it is. They're large enough, but at the same time, I think they are still in the startup mode. So we'll get started with that. So I had actually planned to introduce the panel in the alphabetical order, but the person with this name starting with A is not joined yet. So we'll go ahead and continue. So the format of this session will be that initially we'll introduce the panelist, and each panelist will spend about 2 to 3 minutes sharing his thoughts on the topic. And then we will go into an interactive session between the panelists. Later on in the last 15 minutes, we'll open up the session to all the audience so that anybody can ask the questions. So if you have questions, obviously you can keep typing the questions in the Q&A part so that Shankar will be able to look at the questions. All panelists can also see the questions, and then we will answer. And somebody who wants to have a general conversation can also raise their hand, and we will be able to get respond to them. One request is keep the questions more generic in relation to the corporate startup innovation interactions. We discourage questions specifically asking about any product related to the panelists. They will not be discussing the points related to specific their work area. All right, so let's get started with the first panelist. So I'd like to welcome Raj Pani, founder of Jaggle Prepaid Ocean Services Private Limited. So he is the founder and chairman of Jaggle. He has spent more than 20 years in business consulting. He founded Jaggle, I think now it's completed 10 years, as a network agnostic payment platform on which merchants and consumers could seamlessly interact. A startup evangelist, a strategist, and a serial entrepreneur who previously worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers Private Limited and Yantra. Raj has extensive experience in setting up a business, structuring it, driving the sales, and scale it to the next level. From an academic background, he is a business graduate from New York University Stern School of Business, and he has successfully led the company to over 300 crores valuation and another two companies to 150 crores valuation. Recently, he has won the Most Promising Business Leaders of Asia 2021 by the Economic Times. We are only taking a brief introduction. All these panelists have a large bio, but in the interest of time, we've only introduced a brief. So Raj, let's get started.
Yeah, sorry, interrupting. Me and Abhay both will laugh at that, 300 crore valuation. Okay, so, just from that perspective, maybe I'll do a little bit correction there. I'm a serial entrepreneur, having built, multiple companies. Zaggle is my third company, and like that, I have built about, 5 companies, successfully exited a couple of companies, and in the process of raising either exit routes or funding routes or liquidity events for other companies. Zaggle today is a large company with about 20,000 crores in gross transaction volume, okay, and about 400 crores, roughly about 400 crores in revenue, and about 70 odd crores in profits. Okay, it is a dream project for us, really impacting how I should say the entire payment ecosystem. We are in spend management, and our focus is that any payment which goes from an enterprise, from a corporate, or from a SME, should be on our rails, and that's how is what we are doing. We have another company called Zigzug, which is concentrating on the SME segment. We have recently launched our credit card called Founders, card, and I hope and wish all the other corporates who are present there please apply for Founders Card, and we'll be happy to provide you credit. Thank you.
I just
Okay,
want
so
to add
Raj,
one thing, for Raj, this is not a public secret. This is a public secret, so I'll say it. Raj has invested. Last time I met him, he told me he'd invested in 46 companies. So I don't know what the count is now, but yeah.
No, we met recently. MSR,
it's only a week old MSR, so
so
I hope,
hasn't changed.
unless, yeah.
Hasn't missed so much. But very, very happy to be part of the panel and participating. And thank you for the other panelists to have joined the webinar.
So Raj, let's hear your opening thoughts on the topic and get going from there. Okay.
Sure.
Keep it short, 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. So one of the key things which I learned when I used to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers in the US, right? And it's a very large company out there. Okay, and this was from the years 97, 98, 99, 2000, and these were the days of .com boom. Okay. And we, as sitting in PwC and our job, I was in the MCS practice, and being in MCS practice, we constantly evaluated, consulting projects. Okay. And beautiful things happened is that, when we would go to companies like buy.com, okay, that time buy.com was a very, very large company, and we'd see, how fast would buy.com move, right? The decisions which we would take probably in 6 to 9 months, the decision in startups would be taken in a single day. Okay. So what happens is that, the ideation to execution process, for startups is phenomenal. Okay. Versus you go to corporates where, everything, there is hierarchy, there is layers, you need to take approvals, right? And all of that stuff. Now, how can we collaborate together, to get the best result? Okay. Corporates have, they have a lot of intellectual property with them. They have, money with them. They have the ability to research. They have ability to put people, but ideas, okay, are with the startups. Okay. How do we get them together, to create many more, many more ideas to see light of the day, right? And that collaboration between a corporate and a startup is an ideal place, is how I would see. And I'm very, very happy that, T-Hub has brought them, this thing together, where over a period, already, they are doing a lot of collaborations between startups and corporates. But in coming days, I think what would happen is that corporates and startups, okay, would intermingle with each other to create, products which are useful to the larger ecosystem.
Thanks, Raj. That's a good start. I think that's motivational to the startups and the corporates at the same time. Next, we move on to Saurabh Gupta. So again, I'm just randomly picking the names, no particular order. So Saurabh is the digital program leader for APAC region for Raytheon Technologies. As a brief introduction, he is an innovator and a marketer. He's currently working as the Deputy General Manager and Head of Innovation, Center of Excellence at MSIL. In the past, he's been part of the sales planning, strategic arm of marketing and sales at MSIL. And he has also given the key role of Regional Manager, Sales and Marketing. He has worked on several cross.
Suresh, I'll take a liberty of. You are just. I think you've taken a part of Rohan.
Yeah. I think
so that's absolutely. That's absolutely fine. Not much introduction.
Oh, sorry. I think it got mixed up. Okay. Apologies.
No problem. Not much introduction required. I think you did what.
Sorry,
I'm part of Raytheon Technologies. So that's. And I take care of the APAC region from that standpoint, primarily responsible for partner performance as well as startup engagement in the region. Also do that role on a global perspective in terms of creating right use cases and get the business unit engaged and drive that engagement program. So quickly setting context, I think let me start by thanking Srini, Baneer, and Suresh. A wonderful job in terms of taking this key initiative, driving the important and a very valid point in today's world in terms of how do corporates and startups can come together. It's like a mixture of past and future, right? And I'm not saying which is past and which is future, or a giant and Goliath. And we keep coming and keep hearing about various stories about how they come together. Sometimes it works and many times it doesn't. While there are enough programs about digital marketing, how to raise funds, how to create a team, how to get mentored and things like that, there is not enough that is there. It's this important topic of engagement. So really congratulations for setting this up, and thank you for inviting me. On that account, of course, wonderful panel, mix of wonderful gentlemen who have already created large size businesses and have gone through the journey recently, and getting incumbents and people from the large organizations to get their view. So thank you, panelists, and pleasure to be here. Just to set the context, I'm not going to take much. It's two important points that I want to highlight, which will be very helpful for various startup friends who are looking for interacting with businesses. As I said, one of the important aspects to understand, and when you engage with a corporate business or in this kind of an engagement, is to have a very clear line of sight, a well-defined objective. What do I mean with that? I have seen enough scenarios in my personal experience where a startup has a brilliant business idea, and the startup founder is so much mesmerized with what he wants to propose that sometimes he doesn't talk the language, a basic principle of selling, what exactly is in it for the corporate house. So not talking too much of technology, but talking the business use case in terms of how the solution or something that startup is working on will change the life of the business that you're engaging with, how it will add value. Businesses typically talk about top line, bottom line, savings, and that kind of KPIs. One of the key things that I will advise my startup friends when they drive a corporate engagement, have a very well-defined use case, which clearly defines what is it for the corporate to engage and what will be the end product look like. Defining is not good enough. You have to remind and realign it on various intervals. I have seen where there are projects have been going for over a year and it has lost the essence. Everybody thinks that they understand what they're there to deliver. So the realignment, re-emphasizing, course correction in terms of why we are engaging at first place, a very well-defined objective is very important. And I think that's the first point that I wanted to leave with you. The second important point for both sides is to have a well-defined engagement model. Okay, and I can't have put enough focus and emphasis on that. What do you mean by that? Engagement model means in terms of having a very clear definition. How will you engage? Will it be a proof of concept? Will it be how often you will meet? Who will be the business partners or business mentors that they will be giving time? Raj will acknowledge it from his consulting days. Whenever we took a new consulting project, we always had a very clear definition, right? We went to the people and said how much time you would have to devote to this, how much time your business partners would have to give it to this particular consulting project. Similarly, a startup should very clearly articulate what are you going to need from a corporate team. Okay, and this includes how much man hours they would have to spend, what access to their facilities you will need, how often would you like to take a feedback, and that defining that kind of a cadence and commitment is very important. If you don't have it, then it will be just one other program that will be there in their funnel, which will get lost, and that's one of the prime reason why the things get dropped, because there is no owner of that particular key area of work in the corporate side of it. The other piece is I'm a strong advocate of something called sprint and minimum viable product. My friends from software, most of them would be a tech startup, so they will understand. While you have a long-term vision in terms of what you intend to do, as part of the value proposition, as part of the engagement model, please define your minimum viable product in short run. You will be scrutinized, you will be asked questions, what are you doing? A lot of time a corporate will not be able to understand what is the larger picture. Hence, it's always good to have some kind of a short-term deliverables with very clearly well-defined parameters, a working prototype in your back pocket to showcase to various stakeholders as people change, even at the corporate side. These are some starting thoughts I will like to leave with you, Suresh. Back to you, and looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thanks, Arup. Apologies for the mix-up in the introduction. So next we go with, I would like to welcome Abhay. Abhay is a tech entrepreneur. He's a co-founder, business head, team builder, people person, and a lifelong learner. His startup Recycle works towards empowering businesses to achieve their EPR target and other stakeholders to get complete traceability and transparency with help of its digital technology solution called Recycle. And it's the first integrated digital platform for efficient waste and recycling management. And that's a brief introduction about Abhay. Abhay, you want to add something from your side? And then also
I'll
share
just
your
add,
thoughts.
Abhay is too modest, so I think he won't say it, but I'll just say it on his behalf. Just last week, I think he raised a 22 million round from Morgan Stanley. So, which will now put him on the path to scale and greatness.
Thanks, Srinas, and Saurabh, thanks for the introduction. So I think, like Funny, I also started my entrepreneurial journey in the similar time, 98, 99. Funny was running e-commerce startup. I was also doing the same on a different domain. We both, I think, completed 24 years. Funny, I think, if not wrong, 25th years of entrepreneurship, Silver Jubilee.
No, of course, myself, I have, I started when I was 16 away. So Raj is much ahead of you.
Yeah,
I was in 10th standard when I started. So,
yeah. So
so
I think. So I started, Raj started around in 16, I started at 25, so 9 years senior to me. So I think my journey as an entrepreneur started in 1998 as a first e-commerce marketplace from India called malamal.com. Then I started a SaaS company in 2007, which was called martjet.com. It was like amongst the first few SaaS companies in India. Focused towards the retail market. Any brick and mortar retailer wanted to go digital could use our technology, and SaaS was a new technology by then in India. And that is where that is the first time I started. My whole target customers were corporates, retail corporates, right, where I have to go and sell them. In the first venture, it was not really needed because it was more consumer marketplace. So I had my own experiences with them for first that 6-7 years, where I had Walmart, Future Groups, and Lulu's of the world as our clients. Pizza Hut, all these were our clients. So we had our own experiences, which we'll share subsequently. But then subsequently, Martjet got acquired in 2015 by a Singapore-based company called Capillary Technologies. So after that exit, I left. I became accidentally invested in a couple of startups, not like Raj. I only 1 digit less than him. I think I invested in a couple of startups. After that, after 1 year, then I realized that I'm still a horse who people can bet on, and took a started a third entrepreneurial journey through Recycle. That is in 2016 end. I think last 5 years has been phenomenal, and Recycle has been a marketplace, B2B marketplace for waste. So we are actually in a normal line, digital kabadi wala. So that's what we're trying to do, and it's a huge opportunity, I suppose, and an opportunity where we're trying to solve some real problem and bringing the material back into the circular economy. And I think that is something, bringing that sustainability into the ecosystem. So hopefully getting a good traction and looking forward.
Thanks, Abhay. Next, I think we have the last speaker, Rohan. You'd like to share? I will skip the introduction and let you introduce yourself.
Please. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks to the T-Hub team. I mean, we've been meeting regularly, like Srinivas Rao and shared at the beginning. So it's nice to connect with Abhay San, Saurabh San, and Raj. Maybe in future we meet in person as well. So just to set the context, you all so experienced, they've already shared their words of wisdom. But to the early stage startups, if you were to ask me, I believe there's better time than now, because currently corporates have realized the need for innovation. Of course, operations are extremely important because that gives us bread and butter. And a company like Maruti Suzuki is very, very good in operations. Number speaks for itself. But yes, at the same time, company has realized that is my audio not okay?
There's a little bit of an echo.
There's some echo.
Is it okay now?
Go ahead, Rohan. We can hear you, but there is some little bit of echo.
Okay. 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 So coming back to the point of not, I mean, I could better time where a corporate can engage with a startup like Maruti Suzuki. We have different programs like a corporate accelerator, incubation program, several other programs wherein the company has felt the need to collaborate with startups with a very, very open heart. And of course, like Saurabh said, that there should be a proper engagement structure. So that has been put in because a company the size of Maruti Suzuki, about 18,000 people. So you need a proper structure with startups who are extremely agile, and some of the founders have raised a lot of money. I'm sure these guys must be taking decisions in one day, what a corporate like us probably takes in a couple of months. So on that context, I would just say that there could be for early stage startups to collaborate. And I think this is one of the fantastic times to come together, marry technologically, and of course, create a winning proposition for not just the startups, for corporates as well. Because any partnership has a winning proposition for both the entities. So on that note, yeah.
Thanks, Rohan. So we'll start with a basic, so we are talking about corporate startup interaction. So the 4 people here on the panel know this world very well. So I'd like to get your views. Maybe we'll start with Saurabh. In terms of what do you think, I mean, how is it going today in terms of corporate to startup collaboration?
So I think we have, thanks for asking that question, Suresh. I think it's a very important one. Just to give you a lay of the land, a recent study says that for about top 500 Forbes 500 companies, about 60% are engaged with startups in some shape and form. An average large size Fortune 500 company would have anywhere between 50 to 60 startup engagements ongoing in any year. Okay. Things are improving. Earlier, innovation was a kind of a good, important thing to put it onto your website. For example, in India, if you go to any site of any large corporate, you will see that now innovation is on the front page, including obviously CSR, which is being mandated by law. So, and what will happen is that most of these engagement will stop at hackathons. Okay. They will do 1 or 2 programs, they will ask for some ideas, and that is where they will stop. But what we have seen recently is that now corporates realize, and I think that's something that you would have covered as part of your morning part, is that we corporates have also realized that engaging with startup ecosystem is very important for various reasons, right? It gets the innovation culture, it keeps you ahead of curve, it keeps you, there are all the right business reasons, KPI driven business reasons for engaging with startups. And hence that engagement is now happening on right parameters. There are right programs that are happening. There are various accelerator incubators programs that have been run by the startups. And now that is reflected in the various growths and various partnerships that are coming together. One of the key model which I would like to share with you, which has encouraged, which have emerged in last couple of years and is very prominent, is any large corporate would now like to keep what I call it as a funnel-based system. A funnel-based system will always have 50 to 60 startups in that at various stages. Okay, the pass-through rate in a funnel is about 20%. That means about 4 out of 5 startups drop off in some process. But what happens is funnel solves various other problems. One, when you engage with a startup first, sometimes you are talking different languages. So a proof of concept model, minimal investment to validate what works, to well define a problem. That kind of an approach is a funnel program helps. Second is it helps you, the corporate, to assist the startup in creating a industry specific solution. It also creates, when you're starting a relationship with a startup, you really don't know what will be the long-term model. It also creates that alignment in the due course in terms of how the model works, whether it will be an IP sharing, whether it will be investment, whether it will purely be as a customer. So I think in present context, it is one of the preferred model of engagement where a corporate maintains a large funnel approach. A lot of startups at the start of it. A few of them go from a proof of concept pilot to a commercial stage. That kind of a model is happening, and you will find that from an overall global perspective, as well as to even in an India context, a lot of startups at various levels are getting funding from the corporate business houses. Various numbers floats in those regions across the proof of concept, pilot, and commercial launches.
Thanks, Arup. I think there are, in your brief, there are a lot of takeaways for startups to look at, that there is a potential, huge potential for startups to engage with corporates. So I think that's one. So Raj, I think since you are, sector agnostic in a way, so how do you see this scenario today? Raj, you're on.
So I have a, I have a beautiful take on this. Okay, and I'll relate a quick story. And entrepreneurs' prime job is to do storytelling. Right? Look at some of the banks. Okay, went ahead and did partnerships with multiple fintechs. Right. You look at all the new age banks. They wanted fintechs to come in, do partnership. Bring in agility. Reach to the customer faster. Customer experience. Lot of stuff, okay, which they were not really able to do. Okay, they wanted the fintechs to do, right? So fintechs went ahead, fintechs like us said, fantastic, give us an opportunity. Banking is a very large, it's a big blue ocean. We are unable to, understand, get in. So we said, okay, give us small pieces, right? So they gave us small pieces, right? Then we went back to them. We said, okay, now we have mastered this, give us a bigger piece. They gave us a bigger piece. And what has happened today is that fintechs are buying banks, okay? And the existence of banks is in question, okay? And today, in this forum, I will tell you that banks in India, maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, there may not be any banks to bank with. They will all become custodians, right? So this is called, Joseph Schumpeter's theory of, creative destruction, right? For anything, if you have to create new, you have to creatively destruct the old. And for fintechs today, and you see BharatPe, joining the new bank, which is the Unity, bank like that, taking over PMC. So this phenomenon, over a period of time, now RBI is also realizing that fintechs are, much better prepared to, handle banks, right? So what started off 10 years back, a small partnership between, banks and fintechs is now, it is like cannibalizing the banks itself, right? So this is one dark part of, how do you call it, corporate, startups ecosystem, okay? Similarly, if you look at it, there are so many more fintechs which came into play only on the backing of banks, right? So that story is also true. Today, for Zaggle to be able to do, such kind of, revenues, and without being a regulated entity, we have to thank bank, right? But at the same time, don't be surprised, because our vision is to become a global digital bank. We might acquire a bank, right? So the whole this entire story of partnership also has to be seen in a different way. While we'll say all good things, nice things about this, there is also this challenge which your corporate faces.
That's interesting and slightly scary at the same time, that I think we have some banks also on the session. They may not be very happy to hear that they're possibly funding fintech companies which in the future will acquire the bank itself. So, but it's an interesting perspective, I think.
So similarly, Suresh, just look at, Yahoo, okay? So when Yahoo funded, Alibaba, okay, and look at where Alibaba went and where Yahoo went, okay? So there are examples on both sides, right? There are, sometimes, your investment is much more larger than, the entire company's valuation.
True. So, we have actually a fintech session in the afternoon for Corporate to Startup Connect. So the fintech companies that are participating there, if you're on the call here, I think maybe it's a very positive outlook for you that you can potentially acquire the bank that is going to fund you today in the future. All right, very good way to start this. So now let's, so we identified where we are today. So now I'll put the second, I want to bring a perspective from the other two speakers, Abhay and Rohan. What are the areas where you see that this collaboration, it's from whatever Saurabh mentioned, there is already a good collaboration happening. But what are the areas where you think that this could be even better? Like maybe top 2 or 3 that from your perspective of a corporate world as well as startup world, where this collaboration could actually get better. We start with you, Rohan.
Yeah, sure. I hope my audio is okay now. Okay. Okay. So, some of the key points, I believe Saurabh fantastically covered most of it. In fact, Raj also talked about, if I were to summarize, set a foot in the door and then scale up some inside the corporate, especially for a startup. And then once you have an entry, then you can scale it up. So that's is the key point. If I were to somehow startups, if they are able to get a foot in the door, then of course then sky is the limit. Then scaling up easy, but it is far easier than making the first connect. And especially with the startups dealing with the corporates, I would say don't be greedy, don't get swayed by the balance sheet of the corporate, because some of the corporates like us are extremely cost sensitive. So be patient, especially technology areas like Raj is doing a phenomenal work in fintech. And now onboarding a lot of technology-led startups onto Maruti Suzuki. In fact, 6 startups are already working with Maruti on a multi-crore yearly long contracts. So such is the beauty that if you are patient, if you are not greedy, if you create a winning proposition for both the corporate as well as the startup, and you are not in the race to raise money, sky is the limit. And especially when you are dealing with a company with a large organization like Maruti Suzuki, where the organization in itself is very innovative. But yes, a separate area is carved out to engage with startups. Like Saurabh said, do a lot of POCs, because that's where you test the waters. And what Maruti or other large corporates have is the test bed, because that helps you refine your product. Because we actually salute the entrepreneurial spirit of all the young startups today, because some of them have left their cushy jobs. They've not even sat for placements from the Premier Institute. Salute that spirit. So the model is of co-creation rather than just plug and play. So if you are able to understand these nuances, getting a foot in the door, co-create something. I believe one of the panelists talked about sell what you have, rather co-create something, because this is what I'm looking for, because then you create something new for the customers, and then you create something which a value which is long lasting and not something which can be copied in a month or two. So these are some of the fine pointers I believe which can make the partnership more successful. And last but not the least, for the corporates, it's not easy to go and start everything alone, where people like companies like T-Hub comes into picture. If you have partners like T-Hub and others, the entire journey becomes far smoother and more doable, actually, if you were to ask.
Thanks, Rohan. I think there is a very critical point that probably I'd like to highlight, even though you just mentioned it once. I think sitting on the startup side, we generally look at large corporate and say, okay, they have crores with multiple zeros following it in the bank account. Why are they always negotiating with us for like 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakhs? But I think that's a very important point for a startup to remember, that each corporate also has to be conscious of its own cash flows, and also making sure that what they are doing is not, it's a meaningful expense. It's an expense at the end of the day. It's an investment, and they have to get certain returns on it. So Abhay, your thoughts?
I take Rohan's point that you need to have patience to get inside the corporate, and once you get the foot in the door, the opportunity is much bigger. But the other side, which you have to look at, and I will give a couple of examples. Even the current startup which I am working in 2017, when I started in the first year itself, I got approached by one of the global waste management company from Finland, and there's an inbound, and they liked our platform, they liked our concept. We started interaction. We're new, we're learning, and they wanted to work with us. The 6 levels of meetings have happened. 5 people traveled from various parts to India. Pune, we went, we traveled with them. After one meeting, the next meeting to get the calendar of the people used to take 2.5 to 3 months. So now this conversation is still on. We haven't done a business of single rupee yet, and we are doing 250 crore revenue this year as compared to 1.8 crore that year. So I think somewhere there has to be a thin line how much, what you need to have a process where we were a pure startup. We're lucky that our other businesses clicked. We spent a lot of energy, money on them. We traveled. Being a startup, we have limited resources, although they also did from their side, no doubt about it. Intent was good. There's no doubt. There was no intent. But somewhere I think the corporates also need to manage that this is a startup which need some revenue, some understanding, some work. Doesn't need to be, or at least let's wait for 2 more years. We'll talk about in 2024 or 23. Nobody will force anybody. That was one part. Second part, I feel that there is a need of a platform or a process inside the corporate to deal with startups. So what I wanted to tell you that is the only thing I require. Nothing, no mandate. If the product is up to mark, co-creation, there has to be a single point. As Saurabh said, every website has an innovation. There has to be a person who can be a single point of contact for all startup related things, whether like Rohan is now doing it on behalf of Maruti for some extent, right? So I think similar platform will help startup also to not go everywhere, CIO, CTO, CEOs, everybody, they have to really reach out.
Absolutely.
They have a
Absolutely.
channel to really interact, and then they get the answer that whether it is possible or not.
Absolutely.
Second thing which I observed in my last venture, that was in SaaS company, where our targets were only enterprise retailers like Walmart, Lulu, Future Group, all those guys. So one of the things which we observed that time, and that has changed a bit now, but not yet fully. And when they used to evaluate our product, and they used to have other options. So when many times, at least out of, I had 60 enterprise clients, at least 20 which I couldn't get, has given me a feedback offline that your product was up to mark, it was perfect, it was economically very good for us, but I could not take, because if I take SAP, nobody will question, my job is not at risk. If I take your product and it fails, I will be blamed for it. I am that decision I am going to own. So I saw at least many places, I will say 15 to 20% places where our product was not taken up because we are a startup as compared to an established product by SAP or somebody else, right? So because nobody will lose a job for selecting that product than taking my product and taking that risk. So somewhere that approach change inside the organization, it's not one person can bring, it has to be a mandate from top to bottom that, okay, these are the few experiments. Don't use it for a mission critical, don't use it for your accounting, don't use it for transaction or banking, but there are multiple other areas where you can try it. But by then our product was much proven. We had Walmart as our client, still other 10 failed, 20 failed that key. This is a startup, I will go for an established name where no risk for me, save my ass kind of approach was something we saw in many places. So these are 2 areas of improvement I found, and I think there is a change. So what it was in 2007, we started Marjack in 2022. I think it's quite a change. Startups, corporates are using startups products multiple places, no doubt about it.
Thanks, Abhay. I think you brought up very good point in that every time a corporate makes a decision of working with a startup or choosing to go with an established product, I think that's a big decision that each corporate has to look at when trying to acquire a product that solves one of their internal problems. So I think in the interest of time, I would like to conclude with one question to all of you. So typically what happens is that when we approach a startup, they're very articulate in terms of telling what all should change on the corporate side and how they should work better with the startups. And we would go to a corporate, they are also list out in terms of saying that what should the startups change to work with the corporates. So I'm going to turn that question around and ask all the four of you to respond quickly in terms of what are the things that you are doing internally within yourself, from a startup perspective or corporate perspective, to make you work more effectively with the other partners. So for Saurabh and Rohan, I know from an enterprise or a corporate perspective, what are you doing to make it more effective to work with startups? And Abhay and Raj have the reverse question, is that how are you changing yourself, or how are you adapting yourself to be more successful with in working with corporates? We'll start with Raj.
Yeah. So, very good, question, Suresh, here, right? So, we as, I've been on both sides, as a startup as well as a corporate. So today, if you look at corporates have this issue that how do we reach out to startups, right? There is no platform. We want to reach out to startups. We want to understand what they can bring to the table. We want to, reach out to them. Okay, because there are a lot of issues, problems, which possibly can be solved by, a lean, well-meaning team in terms of, a product or, a service. Right, but they really don't know how to reach out. Okay, and in my opinion, one of the things which the ecosystem should do is create a platform, okay, which would connect startups to corporates and corporates to startups. Right? Corporates, if you see, we are ROI driven. Okay, for any investment which we have to make, it has to yield profits, right? For startup, for it to survive, it need a service, it needs some business, some revenue to come in. Okay, while on the other side, if you look at it, corporates have experience, so they can actually handhold, guide, mentor, and see that if the startup is going in a wrong direction, okay, then like guide them that okay, possibly this is a better direction. So four very important things is A, ability to reach out to corporates, for corporates to reach out to startups. B, sessions like this, right? Sessions where there are corporates, where there are startups, to be regularly done so that there is more interaction, okay, and faster processing. Okay, if there is a platform where people can come in and process this faster, is much better. So we are in fintech, Abe is in recycling, somebody is in EV, somebody is in like manufacturing sector. Now the time for India has come where corporate and startup have to merge together with each other. Corporates have to start behaving like startups. Okay, if you look at today, larger larger companies in most of the countries, right? You see, they work as a startup. Look at metaverse. Look at how they are re-engineering themselves completely. Okay, look at Microsoft. What's happening? Microsoft is become so nimble. Okay, why? Because people are realizing that at the end of the day, whether it is a startup, whether it is a corporate or whoever, they are all reaching out to consumers, right? And consumers want faster, better, and easier experience with any one of them, right? So keeping this context, okay, that customers, we have to make our customers win. Startups and the corporates getting together on a single platform would be a win-win, is how I feel.
Thanks, Raj. So I'll move to Saurabh, your views in terms of what do you think are the success factors that you talked a lot about how you're already engaging with startups. So what are the 2-3 differentiators that are making your organization work successfully or engage successfully with startups?
Yeah, Suresh, I think a very valid point raised by all panelists. And I was pretty intrigued with what Abhay said. He gave the problem and he gave the solution. So I think that's how the attitude of, and that's what defines a successful business and a successful startup. See, I think the important aspect, the large organization, just to share with you, we have 195,000 employees worldwide. Okay, so it's a very large organization. Okay, see what we have done and what large organizations are doing is that they're driving innovation as a key agenda and not for the sake of just putting it as one of the stakeholder statement. They've actually created separate teams to engage with to engage with startups. And in addition to creating those teams, there are separate funds that have been given to us. So, for example, for an incubator team or the team that I work with, I don't have to depend upon business unit to fund a POC or even a pilot of a customer. Right? So, having a separate set of people where innovation is an agenda, failing is okay. So, I don't get penalized if 8 out of my 10 startups fail, because that's supposed 20% is excellent rate, right? So that understanding, that well-defined failing is okay, keeping a separate fund, having a dedicated team, engage in an MVP model. These are 4-5, keeping a large funnel where there are startups at various stages. So hence you have a value proposition or a reason to engage with startups of various size and shapes. Mentoring sessions, that's a sixth thing that on and off we are doing that. We are engaging with organizations like T-Hub to be present there, keep in sync with training our employees in design thinking and some of the making them aware of how the startup agile ecosystem works. So some of these steps extensively been taken at various corporate levels. The various corporates that I engage with are doing all these aspects to address some of the complaints that has been raised in the past by various startups. And they are getting addressed, and that's the reason that the ecosystem is evolving and changing so nicely and towards the positive side.
That's very encouraging, Saurabh. I mean, it's good to hear that there is a approach taken from the corporate side to actually make the startup engagement successful. So, Abhay, one thing is that you work on both sides. So, how have you adapted some processes within your organization to make you successful in engaging with the corporates, because you are going to engage a lot with the corporates? So what are the changes that you have brought in within your or adapted within your organization to make it meaningful?
So I think Suresh, what we have done, we have not really we did not much to change while working with the corporates. We need to actually establish some processes. For example, even a corporate agrees to work with you or use our product, the first thing they require is the vendor registration. And I think this is the most difficult part in India to get into a corporate. You are that 3 years something might happen in 2 meetings also, but then the 3 months or 4 months or 5 months of getting vendor registration done itself is, I think there can be a startup or a technology build where the corporates gets a process where the vendor registration happens in 1 week. And if that problem gets solved, I think half of these problems will be solved. So I think, and there are problems on both sides, because the corporate processes are built with certain consideration, with their whole learnings of their so many years, compliance, all those stuff. And the startup many times do not even have 30-40% of the documents required for that. They need you have paid the PF of your office boy, or there are so many certification documents which are required, which are really not ready with the startups many times. So what I did, because of my first earlier experience, we made sure that in Recycle we had everything which is required. But we had 200 almost good large clients in Madjats. We know what it takes to get vendor registration. In fact, somebody can form a startup and only sell some pencil pen to the startups and get registered at 500 startup as a vendor. That can be a valuable startup itself, because they have already vendor registration with 500 corporates. So that's a big pain area, which I think we actually as a company inside, we created that process. That's something need to be done. We need always were prepared. We had this MSME registration. So generally corporates are 90 days or 120 days payment systems, right? That is standard, pretty in their business terms. But having been MSME registered, you need to be paid in 30 or 60 days, whatever is the law, right? So that sometimes helps, and corporates also value it. They paid during that period. But for startups, 120 days is like you don't even know whether the office will be open after 120 days if you don't get paid for the 120 days. So I think there are those 2-3 operational. They are very operational in nature, but I think those things doesn't matter, because if you don't have, the startup doesn't have that readiness internally, even if your product is great and Saurabh is impressed, he said, let's go for it. But then his process will not allow you to get inside unless you have A, B, C, D, E, right? They can be flexibility of A, B, C, D and E can go, but then ABC is also you need to be ready for. So I think that is the area where we worked internally, but we knew it. But for all the new startups, I think there has to be, they need to have those compliance and all kinds of requirement ready. And then from corporate side, going forward now, the things are changing. It is expected that they will also have more flexibility. Like we said, a startup division. So similarly, a separate registration for startup. Like with not all 10 things, at least 6 things. They can just get entry. Then balance they can fulfill in 12 months. Something of that sort. And those things I think need to come and will then bring this collaboration to a next level altogether.
And in fact, like what we have CSR away,
Yeah.
that we have to spend 2% of our funds on CSR.
Yes, Raj.
And, most of the companies feel, here, there about spending that. Possibility if, we can make a strong representation to the finance ministry and say that at least, 0.5% of your money or, maybe 10% of your business should come from startups, or, you can invest 0.5% of your profits into startups, right? So that would be a huge kicker. If you really look at it, how what has happened in the stock market, with retail guys coming in, right? And
Yes.
today it being so widespread. That's why whether FIs are selling in a full blow or no, but today some of that offtake is taken by the retail investors, right? And the number of accounts which have got opened, about 10 crore accounts is like a huge thing. Similarly, for startups, if investment can be made by these large corporates, okay, and they have like a phenomenal, profit history for them, and they can pick and choose, which kind of startups, they can invest in. So my point is like, how we have employment exchange at a very low level, right? If we have a startup exchange where corporates can come, look at, various startups, pick and choose some of the startups and start interacting and investing, right? An exchange for startups could be a huge, huge opportunity for everyone, for corporates as well as for startups.
Yeah, I
think,
think
thanks, Raj. I think that's a very important point that you brought up. How do we, I think earlier also somebody brought up in terms of providing the visibility of what the startups are doing to the corporates and vice versa, that what are the areas where corporates are looking for innovation.
So I think similarly, just look at Suresh, what has happened is, Prime Minister PM Modi has gone ahead and, announced January 16th as the, National Startup Day, right?
Yeah.
Create exchange. So Startup Day is good, we have Valentine Day, we have Startup Day, fantastic, right? What more than that, right? So actually do the Valentine Day in terms of, getting the startups across to corporates, okay? Do the match fixing, in the right sense, okay? Matchmaking, I would say, not fixing. Do the matchmaking in the right sense and, create an engagement platform, okay? And I think, our state, which has been at the forefront, and Rohan, you should definitely impress upon, your company to set up some operations, in state of Telangana. And we as Telangana state could go out and say and create an exchange, at least for Telangana exchange.
Yeah, I think so. Raj, I have one request for you.
MSR, the onus is on you now.
No, actually, I'm putting some.
I want to just build on a couple of points you made. Actually, since there are a few people here who worked in the US, so they have this in the US. You have this concept of small business, right, and minority employer, and so and we also have it here in an Indian context. So PSUs supposed to mandatorily buy from MSMEs a certain percentage. They get some price preference, etc. That hasn't happened with the rest of corporate India, right? So that's one area to think about, and also to see if there are some parts of what is there in the Small Business Act, right, which can potentially be modified, tweaked, and adapted in the in the Indian context, right? And of course, this idea of doing a building the equivalent of BharatMatrimony.com for startups to corporates is a welcome one. I'm going to come back to you and ask you to write a check to help us build it. Okay. So
no, I have a bigger demand request for Raj, because given his Yantra experience and this thing, maybe you need to come up with the equivalent of heart that is associated with Valentine's Day, and come up with something that every startup and corporate can identify as a unique badge of honor that they can wear and go around on January 16th, so that it can become, it can be a huge product that can be sold across entire India. I think that's one thing. Great, guys. Thank you very. Okay, I have one request. Are you all? I mean, no, we have only about 3 minutes left. Are you all okay to extend it by about 5 minutes? Because we haven't had a chance to interact with the audience. Because I mean, I just continued because I think the kind of information that you are sharing, I think it's useful not only for corporates and startups, for both to understand what are the nuances in this engagement and what both sides need to do to make it happen, and what are the critical points. I had kept 5 minutes for myself to summarize, but I think I won't be able to summarize in 5 minutes. I'll keep it 1 minute. So Shankar, probably for next 5 minutes, we can take questions from the audience. If you already have something, maybe
yes,
you can read.
Mr. Manish Gupta, Mr. Manish, please go ahead with the question.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Shankar. Can you hear me?
Oh yes, please go ahead.
All right, perfect. And wonderful audience. I had enjoyed this last 35 minutes of this time very much. And Abhay, since you mentioned SAP, it's like a serendipity for me, right? I was just wondering कि कोई तो नाम लेगा SAP का और मुझे बोलने का मौका मिलेगा. But I think thank you for that. And I think you were right. There is challenges, and we as SAP have also identified that. In fact, in the morning, our managing director for SAP Labs was the keynote speaker, and she did mention about the open innovation and what we as SAP are doing. So I definitely would like to extend this on behalf of SAP, gentlemen. We want to do open innovation, not just in an isolated way within SAP, but we are looking at extending it to work with our customers, to work with our partners as well, and in a more meaningful way, right? So I don't know if my other colleague, Mr. Justin, is there on this call, who leads the Startup Studio program, but SAP plus the Startup Studio plus T-Hub plus customers, right? I think that makes all the four corners of the quadrilateral, and whether we want to make it a square or rectangle or something else, it's up to us, but happy to really collaborate, right? So we work closely with the MSR and the T-Hub teams now. Let us know, especially Rohan, Saurabh, feel free, Raj, and Abhay, definitely for you, yeah. But yeah, that was just one thought that I wanted to put on the table. Thank you, Shankar.
Thanks, Manish, for your open innovation offer.
Thank you.
Right, so Shankar, next question. I request audience to keep it small, brief in terms of question directly to the panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Manish. Mr. Kaustubh, you can go ahead with your question.
Hi, I run a startup in Hyderabad for manufacturing firms, and I would like to actually connect with Mr. Rohan to discuss if we can do a pilot at Maruti. My question is, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
I request, sorry to interrupt. We definitely would be happy to connect with Rohan, Saurabh, Abhay, and Raj. But let's not use this call for this purpose. If you have questions to ask the panelists, that would be the best opportunity to take it up.
And the easiest way is to write an email.
Thank you so much.
Shankar?
Yes. Mr. Krishna Ravi, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm into energy efficiency, Recon Green Innovations Private Limited. Unfortunately, our innovation is in LED sector, which is a highly commoditized and price competitive area, involving large companies like Philips, Crompton, Wipro, and all. But we have successfully penetrated into corporate sector like Procter & Gamble, Tata Power, including Triple IT campus. But we find it very difficult, when in terms of government, this thing, or raising funding for hardware. Like hardware, we need to put up the funds, first to reach out to the size of the market. But I find, unfortunately, the company was formed in 2014, but the innovation is done in 2015, and we registered as a startup in 2017. But most schemes that the government Startup India announces, or even any other funding, there is not much of hardware funding available for hardware projects. The only fund is Can Bank hardware, which they don't have funds. So we don't know, wherever we go, the policy announcement looks very beautiful, but there is a rider there, should not be older than 2 years, or some these conditions that unfortunately we could not do anything. And in the other end, as per the idea and the concept, we are a company, the idea which won 5 top awards, national awards in the country, and shortlisted in many
Krishna, sorry to interrupt. Can you put the
strategy.
question, please, rather than going into detail?
Yeah. Now, what is it that a company like us, should we connect with the existing brand or something, which in the LED sector, as they say in India, corporate sector is not much aligned towards innovations, generally in these commoditized areas. So any advice in the strategy or the road I should take to go ahead in scaling up? It's like again, chicken and egg situation.
So Krishna, I will give you a very simple suggestion, and that's something that I've given to a lot of people in the commoditized space. And that's what I covered as part of my initial part. The clear value proposition and a unique pivoting, despite the fact you're doing LED, can you do it for a specific area? Can you do it for a specific client? Can you do it at a specific, how they are used, smaller, big, or something like that? Till the time you do not have a very, very focused, small, minimum viable product, unique and not commoditized, it will always be a long struggle. Then you will be in the simple commoditized space that you are in. And that is applicable for any of us doing business, right? I can, when even, we decide to make a product, we always say that while it is similar to a lot of products, this is specifically targeted to a certain section and it has a certain use case. You can look at various areas in indoor lighting, car inside the aircraft, or a reading table lamp. I can't say what exactly, I'm not a subject matter expert. But I think one of the problem that lies is that you are still keeping the product generic from a market perspective. So get that value proposition, spend some time on that, get it well defined, probably you get a better traction.
I believe we can take the last question and then probably sum up the session.
Yeah, Shankar, we can take one more question.
Yeah. Josna, please go ahead with your question.
But Josna, please keep to the question rather than going into elaborate explanation. Josna, go ahead. She might be having some audio issues. Shankar,
Yes.
you want to just give one
We can
chance?
take Mr. Abhishek. Please go ahead with your question. Abhishek Hedan.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so my question is to Mr. Raj. Very specifically, like you are from the fintech background. So while investing, like Mr. MSR was telling that you invested into a lot of companies, is there a sector favorite that you have when you are investing? Or just because you're from a financial background, finance is your favorite? That's the first question. Next is, as an investor, you get a good night's sleep, or Abhay, who's taken the fund, gets a good night's sleep?
So, first question. So
usually neither one sleeps well. But money, the person who puts the money or the person who don't think that just because you have taken the money, you can sleep well. It becomes a huge burden once you take the money.
No, I see Abhay rubbing his eyes too often, so I am worried that the person who is taking the money is having less night sleep than the person, because Raj seems to be more gung-ho and active, so I feel he is sitting on the better seat.
No. So just that Abhay is not well. So I'll speak on his behalf that he's slightly unwell. That's why you see he's rubbing eyes. I think, but to answer your question, I am sector agnostic. Abhishek, I make investments across consumer tech, fintech, health tech, reg tech, etc. And I'm also LP on few funds. Okay, so that gives me a larger pool of investments or companies to look at. And one important thing which we look at is like the entrepreneur, right? Because it's a startup. In the startup, what is there? It is the entrepreneur, his idea, his passion, his ability is what you basically look at, right? And great ideas are killed by team. Bad ideas are converted beautifully by team. So it is the team, it is the promoter, it is the entrepreneur who is very, very important, right? And that is what is the primary thing we look at.
Okay.
You have an idea, please come to us. We'll be very happy to evaluate.
Unfortunately, I am getting into the sector of investment, so I wanted to be one of the seed investment company that wants to join T-Hub. So that's where I wanted to be very specific, where I choose a niche for investments. So that is why the whole question was formed, that whether it has to be very sector specific or
no, be agnostic and come and join us. If you're an investor, let's shake hands and invest in more startups.
So Abhishek, I can give you one sentence, which is that if you are looking to come and invest with startups in T-Hub, I can sleep better tonight. I don't know about the others. So right, guys, thank you very much, all the
Thank
panelists.
You so much. Thanks.
No, but just give me 1 minute to close. I know this session can go on for the next 1 hour. We still won't be full. Just want to summarize 3 points that I got from this session, which is from a startup looking to engage with a corporate. 3 key points that I noted down. One is that you need to focus on the KPIs that the corporate achieves, or the person from the corporate that is engaging with you. What KPIs can you help them do better? I think if you crack that, you automatically get engagement with the corporate. Second thing is that, yes, there is a decision-making process happening in the corporate. So you do need to have patience and make sure that you have all the information available. Third critical point, I think, which was really important, I think, which most startups don't think through, is that be thorough with your compliance. Have a process to make sure. As somebody mentioned, if you go to Rohan or Saurabh, and they like your idea, and then you spend the next Abhishek, please mute yourself. Abhishek, please mute yourself. Shankar, can we mute Abhishek, please? So have your compliance in place. That's very, very critical, because even if it takes 1 year, 2 months, whatever time it takes to reach a corporate and you get a positive decision in your favor, then you delay because your processes are not clear. That's going to be a very big setback for you. Right? So these are the 3 key points that I feel that a startup should look at when want to engage with corporate. Now I want to thank Abhay, Rohan, Raj, and Saurabh. I think Raj I've already met in person. Abhay, I have not had a chance to meet you yet. Hopefully, once you're better, we'll meet somewhere in Hyderabad. Rohan and Saurabh, pleasure meeting you on this forum. I hope to continue the association with you at some level, and then see how we can engage. I think the visibility that all of you are looking for to create as a bridge between startups and corporates. I think T-Hub will be very happy to play the role, and I will continue your dialogue with you going forward. All the attendees, if you have any further questions, please send them across to the mail ID that was shared with you, community Hub. We will try and respond as much as possible to all the queries that we can within the next 1 week. I mean, it may take, because morning itself we had about 200 questions. So I'm not promising we'll respond in 24 or 48 hours, but we will respond to all the queries that come to us. Once again, thank you all. Thank you, MSR, also for joining and enlightening us. And wish you all a good day, and stay healthy. That's the most important. Every update I get every hour, health seems to be the biggest concern. So let's focus on that. And thank you all once again.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All panelists and all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen,
Thank you,
for
everyone. Thanks, Raj. Thank you.
thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here today. To all the attendees, please stay tuned. We are coming up with another interesting session that starts from 3:30 to 4:30. Something to deal with corporate funding for startup. You can use the same link that you have used now for joining in. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day ahead.
The recording has stopped.
important that you have to do a budgeting forecast.